It's not going to be the kind of thing where they're like, ew, gross, an itchy wool sweater, whereas I'm like, ooh, yay, an itchy wool sweater. Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Allison and this is my little crafty corner on the internet where I talk about what I have been knitting lately, and I've got a absolute ton to show you. Bunch of finished objects, well, 2 finished objects, a bunch of works in progress, new stuff you haven't seen. I've got acquisitions to share, so I'm going to just hop right into it with what am I wearing. So this is not a new finished object, but I did knit this. This sweater is based off of the Chaika pattern, which is a Knit Cafe Midori or Midori Hirose pattern. I have knit this pattern a whole bunch of times. I will link to a video either, up here or in the description that shares all of my different Chaika patterns or all of my different Chaika sweaters and the things that I have modified with them. So I knit one purely straight to pattern. This one is not that version. And then every other version that I have made, I have modified it quite a bit. So this one I modified to knit it in the round for, the vast majority of it. I added like big puffy sleeves and I made it have a little bit of negative ease through the body. This version I knit in Lion Brand yarn in their jeans line. And it is the color Top Stitch. And this is a 100% acrylic yarn. I'm not a huge acrylic user. I definitely bought this in like my early days of knitting, but I do really like this particular yarn because it's super soft. It doesn't feel like plasticky. It doesn't feel as like, when acrylic yarn just feels like suffocating. It doesn't breathe at all. This doesn't quite feel like that, which is really nice. And it's washed and held up really, really well. I wanted to wear this today because it is just like so autumnal. Let's consider this like my Halloween episode because I do have some Halloween-y stuff to share with you. But between the color and just like the coziness, I was just feeling like we're actually getting into like full on Gilmore Girls style fall weather. All of the leaves have changed color, finally. It's really like nice and crisp out consistently, and I get to wear a sweater basically every day. It is fantastic. But that brings me to my first finished object, which is a mushroom hat. Give me 1 second and I'm gonna put this on. I had to put it on so that we all get the full experience, but this is a Best Beret by James N. Watts. I was scrolling on Instagram the other day and saw a person's post. Their Instagram handle, I believe, is October Aquarius. I will put a link in the description to their Instagram post, like full idea from them. I said in the comments, I was like, I need to make this for Halloween because I didn't have a Halloween costume yet, and now I'm going to be a mushroom. It was like pure happenstance that I found this post. I hadn't thought about anything for Halloween yet, and I was like, I saw it and instantly I was like, that's it, that's the thing, that's what I'm gonna do. And so I did. This I knit with Istex Plotulopi held double. The light color, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's their, heathered grayish white. And then the red you might recognize as the same color red as my Big Love cardigan. It is extra of the wine red Plotulopi that I used in that cardigan, and I used it for this. So I knit this beret in like 2 days, 2.5 days. I pretty much saw it immediately, like looked for what kind of yarn I could use for it. James recommends like a super woolly wool to really get like the felted kind of effect. The pattern is written for a worsted weight yarn, and I'm not quite sure what like Plotulopi held double would be considered, but it's knit to be at quite like a tight gauge so that you kind of get like a felted effect like you would with an actual felt wool beret. And they also have the increases and decreases that are used are disorganized, like they're not in a spiral, because I find a lot of beret patterns you can really see, I mean, you're not going to be able to see because I have like the little mushroom spots all over it, but oftentimes in knit beret patterns, they have the increases or decreases super, super obvious on especially the crown or underneath where they're all lined up in a row. And I've never really liked that because actual like wool felted berets don't look like that. And it's something that I've always been kind of like about, but I really liked that the increases and decreases are all over the place for this so that your eye can't quite pick out where you're increasing or decreasing, and it gives you that overall felted look. This pattern is knit from like the brim out. So what I did was I cast on, there's an I-cord here if you can see it, and then you pick up your stitches, you increase out, and then you decrease up for the crown. So I basically just did all of my increases with the white color and then knit a couple of rounds in just the red to get like the edge here, and then knit all of the rest of it up in the red and finished with a little I-cord. Then when I was finally done with like the whole hat, I took some just plain Knit Picks wool roving and needle felted little spots all over it to look like a little toadstool. I just think that this is the absolute cutest thing. I knit it super quickly, and I'm gonna try to get this episode out before Halloween, so you might have time to knit one of your own if you would like to. But it really got me on like a beret kick, and I know there's like this meme or it's a reductress article that I have had saved in my phone because I was definitely like a girl growing up who like wanted to wear berets, like was definitely had like a Francophile phase, and I think I'm gonna go back into a beret phase because it was really easy to knit, and I may or may not have ordered yarn to make another one. For this mushroom version, I knit the largest size to get like, you know, maximum mushroom impact. And I think what I'll do like for future berets, I'm going to knit it not at a different gauge. I do think my gauge is a little off on this version because it's bigger, or it's a little bit bigger than it's meant to be for the number of increases that I did, which I don't mind whatsoever. Because I knit it with the Plotulopi held double, it is quite dense. It was actually kind of hard on the hands to knit. Plotulopi I find is really, it's like quite a stiff yarn. There's not a lot of give as you're knitting it. So I ordered a little bit of extra. I ordered another skein of yarn from a different project that I will show you next to have enough to make another one. So I'm going to knit another one in Brooklyn Tweed. I think it's Shelter yarn, which is the right weight for the pattern, but that yarn is much lighter, much springier, but still has like that woolly texture to it, so it should have kind of the felted look without the stiffness that the Plotulopi has. I think that the like firmness or the stiffness of the Plotulopi is like good and kind of what I want for like this version, like a Halloween hat version. Like you can see it's quite stiff. It wants to stay where it is, but it's a little too stiff, I think, for like day to day. I want it slightly like looser, a slightly more ease of like bending over your head for like a regular day-to-day beret. And hopefully I will get that with my next version. Either way, I am so excited about this silly little beret, and I'm gonna take it off because it's a look. I'm not gonna sit here with a mushroom hat on for the rest of the video, but I'm just so excited about it. I'm excited to hand out Halloween candy. It's going to be super cute. I think what I'm going to do to like make this into more of a costume is wear all white. So basically it's like the mushroom hat and then the underside of the mushroom, and then I will just wear all white. Or I can look up other like mushroom characters. I feel like there's characters in Mario that have like little mushroom hats, so I could look that up as well. Obviously I don't know it off the top of my head, so I'm probably not going to, but either way, it is a quick, easy, fun little Halloween hat, and I'm glad that I have it. Okay, I took it off so that I can see a little bit better. The last thing that I wanted to say about this is the little spots that I put on it to make it look more like a toadstool. The way that I organized the spots, I guess, was putting the bigger spots closer to like the stem, and then they get smaller and smaller and more in frequency as you get to like the rim. I basically just looked up pictures of those red and white spotted mushrooms to see how they looked, and then made it a little bit cuter, because you know, the ones in real life mushrooms are not as like perfectly evenly spaced like this, but I had to use a couple of different needle felting tools to do it. So I have just like a basic needle felting kit and used like the same, you know, backing foam, whatever, across the whole thing, just moved it around. And for the larger ones, I used like the handle where it has like a whole bunch of needles in it to get the whole thing. And then obviously I have a bunch of really, really tiny ones. And for those, I just used one needle by itself. And essentially what I would do was like start felting the fibers in, and then I would take the needle and kind of swirl it around the fiber and start felting it like that, which really helped to get like a perfectly round shape instead of kind of like a splotchy look. But then as they got bigger, I wanted the bigger ones to look a little bit more like organic. And so I made those purposefully a little bit more misshapen or uneven. But you can really see this hat has like a lot of structure to it. I have not wet blocked it because I know from using this red yarn previously that it bleeds a lot, like a lot. And I am knitting this, or I knit it with white yarn and it has white spots on it. I don't know how you could wet block this and not have the red dye go all over the place. When I was washing my cardigan that's knit with the same red yarn, I had to switch out the water like 4 or 5 times until it ran clear, because I really didn't want that red to transfer. Like, it transfers on your hands as you're knitting it. So I don't know if you have any tips in the comments for how to block items that you know for a fact are going to bleed. Please let me know. Either way, this is like literally a novelty hat. I'm not going to be wearing it all the time. It does not need to be super washable, so I'm not mad about it, but I definitely won't be able to wear it in the rain. But I think that is all I wanted to say on my little mushroom beret. I'm so excited about this, and I can't wait to enter my beret era, apparently. Now my next finished object is also a hat. This is the Harlow Hat Worsted version by Andrea Mowry. This I showed you in my last podcast episode that I had just started it. It is my first brioche project, and I was so shocked at how surprisingly easy brioche was to knit. I feel like I have instantly forgotten how to do it, so I'll need to look up a brioche tutorial if I'm ever going to knit one again. However, I did find it to be quite a quick and easy knit. I think it's definitely a good hat for gift knitting because it's so stretchy and gushy that it will fit like a lot of different heads, and I think it kind of has that like little extra something that a plain ribbed hat doesn't have because of the 2 tones. I knit this in Brooklyn tweed. I think it's the shelter yarn, but I'll put it on the screen if it's different. The red is called Long Johns and the purple is called Homemade Jam. So I mentioned when I was talking about the mushroom beret that I had ordered yarn to make another one, and I ordered more of the purple Homemade Jam color to knit myself a little purple beret. Because when I was knitting this, I really thought that I would like it best with the red out, and I do like it with the red out, but I think I actually prefer the purple color. Luckily, this hat is completely reversible. So I did the tubular cast on, 2-color tubular cast on for the cast on edge, which makes it fully reversible. Nothing looks silly on the inside. And then the decreases is what I was kind of worried about as I was doing them. Like, would it look okay from the inside if I wanted to wear it with the purple side out? But I actually think it looks fine. So on the inside, they just kind of, the purple V's just kind of go together and look totally fine. And then on the outside with the red, you have like that one straight line of red with the decreases going into it, which also looks really nice. This hat, I'm not sure how I want to wear this hat. If you look at the pictures that Andrea Mowry has, she's kind of wearing it like this, where it's like puffed up a little bit at the top, but I I don't think that looks good on me. So I think I'll just wear it like full-on beanie style where it's pulled all the way down. I think that's the way it's going to look best on me. But I think if I were to knit this hat in the future, I might knit it slightly shorter so that I don't have all of this like bunched up at the back here. Otherwise, I knit this straight to pattern, no changes. It was pretty quick and easy. It did kind of feel like it was taking a while because for brioche, you're basically knitting each round twice, but I think that the overall effect is super worth it, and I'm probably going to do more brioche projects in the future. I'm really happy with the yarn for this. It is so soft and it is so like light and airy. This hat feels like it weighs nothing, but it still feels like woolly and slightly rustic, I suppose. It's not like a rustic yarn like the Plotulopi that feels like slightly rough. There's no roughness to it, but it has like that earthiness that really makes you want to just squish it. So I'm really excited about this and to have a beret version in the purple in the future. All right, that is it for finished objects. Both of my hats were my only 2 finished objects this week, but I have a lot of works in progress to share with you. So this is my office vest that I'm knitting for my dad for his birthday / Christmas this year, and you can see it's no longer on the needles. So basically what I've done with this was knit the entire body section of the vest. So I knit this to I think 15 inches, but I want to stop before splitting for like the arm opening. Obviously this is knit from the bottom up, so the next step is going to be splitting the front and back to knit like the arm hole up, you know, the neckline, shoulders, that whole thing. However, my dad is really tall. He is 6'4", which is much taller than the average male, and essentially I'm looking at this. This is where it says to stop and start the arm openings, and I'm like, there's no way that this is long enough to be comfortable for him. So I put this on waste yarn to basically put it on hold. Hello, Jackie. You gonna come and say hello? Hello. We have Jackie who's joining us now. You gonna sit down? You can sit. Well, I'm not sure if you can see Jackie at this point, but he'll be joining us for the rest of the episode, it seems. But I know that my dad wants to be able to wear this like to the office, which I'm not sure for like men where that's supposed to hit on like the hip area. Because for women, it's just like, is it cropped? It kind of depends on like what pants you wear it with. Like if the sweater ends up a little bit too short, just wear it with high-waisted pants. But for men, obviously that's not necessarily an option. And because my dad is so tall, I want him to be able to try this on to make sure that it's long enough before I start the armholes, because I just have a gut feeling that it's not long enough. And I'm not going to see him until Thanksgiving. So I put this on hold. It's just gonna be sitting in timeout until after Thanksgiving. I can make him try it on, make sure that it's going to be long enough before finishing the sweater. Because honestly, I can't imagine anything worse than just moving ahead right now just to get it done and off the needles, and then give it to him, have it not fit, and then just need to rip out the entire upper body to add length to it anyway. So it's on hold for the time being. I will update you on its progress probably when it's done, but that won't be until at least December. I am knitting this office vest and my next project both in Cascade 220. So this color is Greystone Heather, and I'm surprised. It's very easy to work with. I haven't used really Cascade yarns before. I know it's like one of like the big brands. It's at like every yarn store, but it's just never really come up, honestly. And I really do like yarns that have that kind of toothy feel to it, that have like a more rusticy feel. This definitely does not have that feeling at all, but I think especially for gift knitting, it's like a good all-rounder wool. Like it's not something, it definitely has no itch factor. So giving this to my dad and then I'm knitting another sweater for my husband, it's not gonna be the kind of thing where they're like, ew, gross, an itchy wool sweater, whereas I'm like, ooh, yay, an itchy wool sweater. but I think it has really nice stitch definition, and I'm excited to see what the cables do when I block this. But that is it for the office vest for the time being. So when I got my dad's vest to kind of a stopping point where I didn't want to knit any further, I figured I might as well just cast on my husband's Christmas birthday present. And I am working on a Leelanau sweater for him, which is apparently an area in Michigan. I did not know that. Thank you, Mom, for pointing that out in my last episode comments. But I'm knitting this for my husband. We just like looked on Ravelry at patterns together and saw that this is kind of a nice unisex pattern. It's not necessarily written to be unisex, but they have a million sizes. They have from like babies through kids all the way up to adults, and I think like several extra large sizes. So it's pretty size inclusive. I am knitting a size medium for my husband, which is, I basically measured a couple of his like favorite sweaters to see what the size was, like what was the width, and chose this size based off of that for him. And then he chose the colors. So like I said, this is also knit in Cascade 220. The blue shade I believe is called Atlantic, and the silver is, I think, silver gray. My gauge on this with the recommended needles was just a little bit too tight, so I'm actually knitting these on a size up, which are the same size needles that I'm using for my dad's vest. So I'm gonna try to finish this entire sweater before Thanksgiving so that once it's done and I can have my dad try on his vest, that I can just kind of fly with that and I don't have to wait for the needles to be done. But so far, I just cast this on the other day. It's kind of flying by. It is the easiest colorwork pattern I've ever done, but it's also really motivating because the colorwork's only every couple of rows and you only do one round of it. You're like, okay, let's just get to the next one, get to the next one. So it makes it kind of like popcorn knitting, you know, you want to just get to the next colorwork round. I really only just started this, so I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but I do think that this is going to be a really nice sweater for him. I think I will probably knit myself a matching version because I'm a nerd and I like to do that, obviously in different colors. I think what I'll probably do with my version is knit the main color in like a solid not fuzzy yarn, and then for the little like lice stitches, I think is what it's called, I might use the same yarn with mohair or a contrasting yarn with mohair, just so it has like a little bit of fuzz, but not too much fuzz. I think that might look super cute. And luckily for my husband, I have him here so he can try it on to make sure that it's going to be long enough. This pattern, like I said, it's not necessarily written to be unisex, but there's no like body shaping. So the only real modification I'm going to have to do is make the body and sleeves, I think, a little bit longer, which is not difficult to do. So that is where I am with my Leelanau sweater, just kind of getting into the meat of it, but I think this is going to turn out really, really nice. That is not it. I have another work in progress. I recently went on, I guess, a business trip. I went on a trip for work and had to fly, and pretty much the only thing that I want to bring on airplanes is socks because it's so easy to like pick up and put down, and it's small and compact, like it fits really easily in my backpack, and I'm not having to haul out an entire sweater. So I cast on a new pair of socks and I went all the way through the heel flap and turn between all of my flights last week, which I think is not too shabby considering I was only flying for 3 hours twice. This is a pattern of my own design. I am calling them in my mind the Coziest Cable Socks. We'll see if that sticks. But I essentially knew I wanted to knit something with cables, but not too many cables, and I wanted to incorporate mohair for, you know, fall and winter cozy vibes. So I knit quite a long cuff on this. I think it's about 2 inches with the base yarn, which is Sweet Georgia, what is it called? I think it's their silk mohair sock yarn in the shade Candy Apple. And I held that with mohair. This I think is just the Drops Kid Silk mohair. I don't know the name of the color off the top of my head. I normally knit my cuffs to be like 1/2 inch to 1 inch. I'm not someone who typically does like a really thick cuff, but I really like how it looks, especially with the mohair. It's just like very super cozy. If you wanted to, you could cuff it down. And I knit a fairly long-ish leg for me. I typically do like shorter socks. I don't wear like the tallest socks all the time. So I knit a longer cuff with the mohair, and then I put some cables, just a couple, on the front part of the sock. So it's a 3-column section with cables that are alternating, which means that for the most part, you're just knitting. There's only been 6 rows where you actually do any cabling so far on this sock. So really not all that much extra effort, but I think it looks really nice. I really like how like a slightly bigger cable just has a little bit more impact, where I feel like normally on socks you're doing really tiny cables because the stitches are so small, but doing a cable with a few extra stitches in it I think looks really nice, and it's going to look good as it continues through the foot. So like I said, knit the leg, and then for the heel flap, I didn't do any texture to it. Oftentimes they're knit with like knit one, slip one on the front side, and then just purling your way across the back. I didn't do that this time because I held it with the mohair again. Mohair with silk, like a silk core mohair, is really pretty strong. So adding that to the regular sock makes this heel flap pretty sturdy. So you don't really need the extra reinforcement of having those slipped stitches have the extra yarn floating across the back of the fabric. That's why it makes those kind of heels stronger, so that if they're rubbing against shoes or whatever it may be, that they're less likely to create holes in them. I think with the mohair it's going to do pretty much the same thing. Not that I would wear these as like a boot sock between the mohair and this very soft silky mane color. I don't think that these are going to be like outdoor socks, but I think they're going to be very cute, very cozy indoor socks. These socks, I have all of the cables. There's 3 like columns, and each column has cables in it. I have all of the cables going the same way. I toyed around with having like the inside column and 2 outside columns going opposite directions for the way that the cable leans, and I ended up ripping that back and having them all go the same direction because I just think that that looks nicer. So I think what I might do is on the second sock have the cables rotating the opposite way, so that the cables, how they lay on your feet, are going opposite directions, instead of trying to make 3 columns work with things going different directions. With the 3 columns on this sock, having just the column in the middle going a different way and the columns on the outside going a different way, it just kind of looked weird and uneven. So having them all go the same direction on the sock I think is going to look uniform. If I were to have the cables going outwards like they typically do, I think I would need that center column to be something different and not use the exact same cables that I'm using on the outside. But this is like my 4th sock work in progress that I have right now. I have a lot of socks languishing that I really need to start finishing. So hopefully after I get my husband's sweater done, I can like get my sock mojo together and get a bunch of second socks done, because I have this one, I have a pair of slipper socks, I have another pair of colorwork socks that all need to be finished and get partners. That is it for pretty works in progress to show you, and now I have this. So this felted piece of sadness was a beginning to a Stockholm sweater V-neck version that I scrapped. Basically just decided I was using the wrong yarn, tossed it in the washing machine, and I think I'm probably going to make coasters out of this. What happened was I was talking in my last podcast about wanting to use this yarn, which is Nutidin yarn in the shade Atikavat. I wanted to use this for like a big oversized V-neck sweater and decided on using the Stockholm sweater V-neck pattern. I cast on the back panel and I was a couple inches in and just knew that it wasn't going to work. I was holding this yarn single, which I feel like I remember If you've followed the Newton Yarn Company on Patreon, they have like videos where they discuss all of their different colors as they're coming out, the color inspiration behind them, and the differences between the different yarns. It's really, really interesting. And I could have sworn, and I guess I could go back and look, but I could have sworn she said that this particular version of their yarn would be good to hold single. Like you wouldn't need to hold it double. They typically tell you if like this version should really be held double. But knitting the single, I was getting so many almost holes in it. There's just enough variation in the yarn that when it got really, really thin, I was having to drop down and literally add in extra yarn to reinforce it as I was going. And I was only a couple of inches into it and I was like, this is like too stressful. Trying to monitor whether or not the yarn was thick enough as I was going just was not it. So I was just tired, I was done with it, and decided to toss it into the wash to get the yarn felted. I knew that with how thin and fragile it was as I was knitting it, that trying to unravel that and make it usable again was just going to end up with me breaking the yarn all over the place, and I need new coasters. So essentially what I'm going to do is like clean up, straighten out the edges and sew them together and make a couple of coasters because I can. But what I've decided to do was still use this yarn for that pattern. I'm not going to be holding it double because I really like the lightness that this has when you hold it single, but I decided to buy a lace weight yarn to hold with it. Essentially, I wanted to have that knowledge, or that the literal structure of having a yarn with a little more twist, a little more density to it, as like the backbone for the sweater, where this can really shine on top without having to rely on this really thin, very airy yarn as the structure of the garment. Literally just got this yarn in, so I haven't swatched it yet, and it might change the gauge a little bit. We'll have to see. But this is from the same brand that does Leelanau, Plotulopi. It's the Istex brand, and this yarn is called Einband, or I'm not Icelandic, I'm not sure how to pronounce this exactly, but it is a lace weight yarn. It has twist in it, so unlike the Plotulopi, or I'm not actually sure, I've never used Leelanau, so I don't know if there's any twist in that. But this is a lace weight yarn that has twist in it, so it has a lot more strength and durability than another unspun yarn, because this is an unspun yarn. So the plan is right now to hold these two double to kind of get that happy medium of having a little bit more strength without losing the lightness that I was really hoping to achieve with this sweater. The September sweater V-neck is written to be knit with, I think it's 2 or 3 strands of mohair held throughout, and like that's all you're knitting it with. And I don't love mohair yarn just because it sheds so much. I like how soft and fuzzy and fluffy it is, but it's just not like something that's super functional in my day-to-day life. So I think with these two together, I'm going to get that fluffiness that I'm looking for with this unspun yarn, but the structure that that yarn needs with this lace weight yarn. So hopefully these two work together really well. I ordered this through Webs, or I think is it yarn.com? They pretty reliably have Istex yarn, which is from Iceland. You can order from Istex directly, but the shipping is just insane. So I got this from them. I literally just got it in. I got a few balls of this, so hopefully I will have enough to make a sweater. And I just think it'll be more washable and durable by using the two together than it was to use the unspun yarn single by itself. That reminds me, if you don't follow me on Instagram, you wouldn't have seen, but Jack ripped a little hole in my Big Love sweater recently, and that is knit with Plotulopi held single, which is another reason that that's maybe not the best idea. Not that it's a terrible idea, but he wasn't doing anything wrong, but he was trying to get my attention, and what Jack often does to get our attention is he will stand on his hind legs and put his paws up onto your shoulder or wherever he can reach, and his claw just literally snagged on one stitch and he pulled, and instead of pulling that thread like you would normally have happen, when the yarn has like a little bit more structure to it, if he gets like a nail caught and pulls on it, typically it'll just pull that one strand of yarn out, and you can kind of like wiggle things back into place. But because that was knit with an unspun yarn and it was just held single, there's not like a ton of density to any given strand of yarn. And so he pulled and it broke and created a hole. So essentially what I did was I pulled that yarn to the back of the fabric and just needle felted it in place, and it worked like a charm. You can definitely see on the inside of the fabric where it was felted, and you can kind of feel that the fabric feels a little bit different there because it has been felted into place, but from the front you can't see it. So I think it worked very easily and was a great solution to any future holes that I'm probably going to inevitably have in that sweater. All of this is not to say that I wouldn't ever knit with an unspun yarn held single again. I definitely would, especially with Plotulopi, because it's a little bit stiffer, it's easier to work with, and I never had the issue of it being so thin that I was worried about it falling apart or creating holes like I did with the Newton yarn. However, I think if you are going to be working with unspun yarn, that it's not a bad idea to have a needle felting kit on hand just so that you can fix any holes that might come up. And last thing I have to share with you today are a little bit of gifted acquisitions. So, like I said, this is apparently the Halloween episode, and I have 2 different Hocus Pocus themed yarns to share. So my mom knows how much I love Hocus Pocus, the movie. The new one was surprisingly good. I was really worried that, like any sequel, but especially a sequel that's coming like literally 30 years later, I was really worried that they were just going to effectively remake the movie or just hit all of the exact same jokes. So I was pleasantly surprised that the new movie didn't do that, and that it had like its own storyline. Like it continued the story, it hit some of the same beats that you wanted it to without it being the exact same movie or the exact same jokes. So highly recommend Hocus Pocus 1 and 2. I did a double feature after we got our COVID boosters, and then happily in the mail got some Hocus Pocus themed yarn. So the first one is from Arcane Fiberworks. I will say I don't know either of these companies particularly well. So it's a variegated yarn that incorporates the 3 colors of the witches with the green, purple, and red, as well as kind of a dark in between brown and black shade. And then I have also Hocus Pocus from A Busy Life, which does kind of the same thing, but much, much brighter. So it has like almost neon pink, a pretty bright purple, a super saturated like like emerald green, and a navy blue. Jackie's back, hello. You coming to sit on my lap? Come on. Anyway, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be using these yarns for. I think what I'm probably going to do is knit another pair of socks. I know I have so many sock work in progress right now, but I think this is like perfect Halloween sock material. My plan, or at least what I'm thinking of at the moment, is to do a striped sock, you know, like classic witches sock style, where it's black or like a really dark brown, and then for the stripes use this variegated yarn. So it'll have like obviously the stripes of like a solid color, and then these stripes will transition between the other colors, and I think that's gonna look kind of cool. But I'm not a huge variegated yarn user. If you have like patterns that you tend to go for with variegated yarns, let me know. I'm very interested. I have enough to do a couple of projects, so let me know in the comments what you like to use variegated yarn for. But that covers just about everything that I wanted to say today. I hope you have had a good one, and I will see you next time. Bye.